Okay, picture this. It's 10:00 p.m. on a Tuesday. You're in Seoul, South Korea, in a district called Gangnam.
Mm-hmm.
You walk into this brightly lit cafe, and it is absolutely packed.
Mm-hmm.
But you look around, and the whole vibe is, well, it's off.
It's not a social hour. Not at all.
There's no music. No one's laughing over beers. The room is just full of parents, mostly mothers, maybe their 40s, sitting alone.
Or in these small, quiet groups.
Exactly. And they're all checking their watches, staring at their phones. They're just waiting.
It's a scene that plays out every single night there. These parents are basically in a holding pattern. They're the logistics team waiting for their, I guess, staff, their own children, to finish a second or sometimes even a third shift of the day.
And that second shift is exactly what we are unpacking today. We're doing a deep dive into the world of the hagwon. Now, if you look that up, a dictionary will tell you it means, private institute or cram school.
But calling a hagwon a cram school, it feels like a massive understatement. In the US or Europe, a cram school is usually for kids who are struggling. You go because you're failing algebra, or maybe you do a quick boot camp for your SATs. It's a temporary fix.
Yeah, exactly. In South Korea, the hagwon isn't the exception for the struggling student. It's the standard.
Yeah.
I mean, we're looking at betas showing over 80% of all school-age students attend these places. It's the basic operating system of childhood.
It really is. And our mission today isn't just to sort of gawk at how intense it is. We have a huge stack of sources here. Personal diaries from mothers in Seoul, government economic data, even psychiatric insights from Yale.
And we are trying to answer this one massive, complicated question. Is this whole culture of academic pressure hurting South Korean children? Or is it, weirdly, the only logical way to help them survive in this hyper-competitive economy?
That is the ultimate question. Because on one hand, you have a system that produces these incredibly high achievers. But on the other hand, as we'll see, you have a mental health crisis that's starting younger and younger.
When I first read the source notes, I honestly thought there were typos in the data. We're talking about schedules that would burn out a Wall Street banker, but they're being applied to elementary school kids.
It's intense. But to understand why, you have to realize that for these parents, this isn't just about getting an A on a report card. For the families we're discussing, the hagwon isn't some extracurricular hobby. It's seen as a basic survival mechanism.
So let's zoom in on that. If you want to see the epicenter of this whole culture, the Silicon Valley of studying, you go to a neighborhood called Daichi.
Daishidong, in the Gangnam district. It's often called the Mecca of private education. And just to give you a sense of scale, this one neighborhood, it's not even that big geographically. It's home to about 1,200 hagwons.
Like 1,200?
1,200, yeah. If you walk down the main street, you're not seeing clothing stores or movie theaters. You just see these narrow buildings with signs stacked 5-6 stories high. Math Academy, English Academy, essay writing, science lab. It's a whole ecosystem.
And the notes mentioned that the actual infrastructure of the street has sort of mutated to support it. It's not just the schools.
Exactly. You've got these study cafes, but they're not like a Starbucks. They are designed for total sensory deprivation. And a lot of them are open 24 hours a day.
I saw these things in the notes called therapy zones, which sounds kind of nice, right? Like maybe you get a massage.
Not quite. A therapy zone here is basically a soundproof glass box, like a cubicle on the street or in a cafe where a student can just lock themselves in to study with zero distractions.
It sounds like a phone booth mixed with a sensory deprivation tank.
Some even have locks for your smartphone at the door. You have to surrender your phone to get in. And then surrounding all of this, you have clinics advertising brain-boosting treatments, IV drips, herbal medicine, all marketed to keep your stamina up for studying.
Wow. It's like an industrial complex, and the raw material is a teenager's attention span.
That is a very, very accurate way to put it.
So into this world, we have one of our main sources, a woman named Lee Kyung-min. She's a former ad exec, husband's in finance, successful upper-middle-class people, and she basically describes her life as being a high-stakes Uber driver for her 2 daughters.
Her routine is just relentless. She talks about shuttling her kids around 7 days a week, but there's this one image she describes in her diary that really stuck with me. It wasn't the studying, it was dinner.
The convenience store dinner.
Right. She talks about seeing these small kids, like elementary school age, sitting in cafes or convenience stores at 5 p.m. They're not laughing or running around. They are just shoveling food into their mouths with a workbook open on the table.
Because if they go home for a proper meal, they'll miss the start of their 6.0 DOPM class.
That's it. It's just calorie intake to sustain the next 4 hours of math. And Miss Elise says, she was right there with them, waiting in those cafes late into the night.
And of course the kids push back. Her daughters would ask, well, why do we have to do this? Our friends are playing. And Miss Lee had this very specific, almost chillingly logical answer for them.
It's the logic that holds up the whole system, she told them. Academic achievement equals opportunity, and opportunity equals a happy life. It's a straight line. The belief is if you break that chain at age 10, you lose the happiness at age 30.
Okay, so here is where it gets really interesting and, frankly, a little scary. I think most of us would assume this kind of grind kicks in during high school. You're 16, prepping for college exams, it's crunch time.
That would be the normal assumption, yeah. But in South Korea, the goalposts have moved a lot. The race now starts much, much earlier.
We're talking about preschool.
We are. The data shows that nearly 50% of children under the age of 6 are getting some form of private education.
Under 6, these are kids who are, still learning how to share blocks.
And by the time they hit 5 years old, that number jumps to over 80%. It's just the norm to attend extra classes on top of regular kindergarten, and the cost is. It's staggering. We're seeing fees over 1.5 million won a month. That's well over $1,000 just for an English-focused kindergarten.
That's huge money. But what really blew my mind was this concept of the level test.
This is a critical piece of the Daiichi ecosystem. To get into the best hagwons, you have to pass an entrance exam. And yes, they have them for 4-year-olds.
An entrance exam for a 4-year-old. I can't even wrap my head around that.
And because the spots are so limited, parents are hiring tutors to prep their toddlers for the entrance exam of the cram school. It's a cram school for the cram school.
It's just a recursive loop of testing, and it ramps up fast. There was a detail in the notes about 3rd graders taking tests to get into elite math hagwons. But the test isn't on 3rd grade math.
No. To pass, they often need to know the high school curriculum.
Hold on, I want to make sure I heard you right. 3rd graders are doing high school math.
That is the expectation for the elite track. Mrs. Lee mentioned this common saying in Daiichi. If you want your child to go to medical school, you need them to do 6 passes of the entire math curriculum.
What does 6 passes even mean?
It means they've gone through the whole textbook series, start to finish, 6 times, for perfection. And the rule of thumb is that the high school math curriculum needs to be finished before the child even enters middle school.
So a 12-year-old is expected to have mastered calculus.
Essentially, yes. In Daiichi, if you're learning high school math in high school, you're already considered way behind.
That is, I don't even have a word for that. I mean, biologically, a kid's brain is still developing abstract reasoning skills at that age. Feels like trying to install complex software on a computer that's still being built.
And that is exactly where the herding argument comes in. You can't just maximize human efficiency forever without something breaking. And Mrs. Lee, she experienced this firsthand. There was a specific moment, a real turning point for her.
This was the story in the cafe, right?
Yes. She's sitting there, waiting, probably looking exhausted and stressed out. And her oldest daughter, who was about 8 at the time, comes out of her class, looks at her mom, and asks this question that just shattered her.
She asked, "Mom, were you a bad student?"
That's the one.
Oof, that's rough.
It hit Miss Lee so hard because she realized her daughter had built this logical framework just from observation. The little girl thought, Mom looks miserable. School is all about studying, so Mom must have failed at school, and that's why she's this unhappy.
The child couldn't imagine that you could succeed, get the job, the money, the family, and still look that miserable.
Exactly. Miss Lee realized she was modeling a version of adult life where happiness was totally absent, even though by all measures, she had won the game. And this isn't just one mother's story. We have clinical data from Yale that backs this up.
Right, from a Dr. Peter Ney, a psychiatrist at Yale studying this group.
He's noted this really disturbing rise in depression symptoms in South Korean children under the age of 10.
Which medically is a huge red flag.
It's extremely rare. Clinical depression in a 9-year-old is usually tied to severe trauma, war zones, abuse, a major loss. But Dr. Ney links this directly to the pressure from the private education sector. The trauma is the daily schedule.
There's a really tragic story in our sources that highlights the stakes here. It's from another mother, Park Yuna. She talks about one of her daughter's classmates.
This is the most difficult part of the research, but it's important. Mrs. Park describes this little girl as charismatic, savvy, a kid who loved to dance, by all accounts just a bright, wonderful child. But She was seen as lacking ahead for academics.
And in that system, that's a heavy label to carry.
She was trying to get into one of those elite math hagwons in Daiichi, and she failed the entrance test.
Yeah.
And tragically, this elementary schooler died by suicide.
It's just heartbreaking. And what strikes me is how the source material describes the stigma. Mrs. Lee said that in this system, if you're not good at math, you are literally seen as an idiot. It's a brutal binary.
That's the key. The focus is entirely on weakness. It's not about cultivating strength. If you're a brilliant dancer but you're bad at calculus, the system identifies you as defective. It's a deficit-based model.
So we have the herding argument laid out pretty clearly. It causes depression, it costs a fortune, it steals childhood, and in the worst cases, it costs lives. So the obvious question is, why? Why do parents keep doing this?
That's the million-dollar question. Is it all just vanity? Bragging rights?
It feels like it has to be deeper than that.
It is, and this is where you have to look at the helping argument, or at least the economic rationality behind it. If you step back and look at South Korea's economy, you see these structural issues that drive the fear. First, South Korea has a 76% college enrollment rate. It's one of the most educated places on earth.
Which on paper sounds great.
It is until everyone has a degree. When everyone has a bachelor's, the degree itself stops being special. It just becomes the baseline, the ticket to get into the waiting room.
So you don't just need a degree, you need a degree from the right university.
Exactly. The Sky-Y universities, Seoul National, Korea, Yonsei. And the reason you need that degree is the job market. There's a massive shortage of high-quality, stable jobs. You have the big conglomerates, Samsung, Hyundai are offering great pay, great benefits. And then you have everything else.
And the gap between great and everything else is huge.
It's a chasm. Plus, you've got a weak national pension system. So parents are terrified that if their child doesn't land one of those top-tier jobs, they'll face a lifetime of financial instability.
There's a cultural idea mentioned in the notes, no second chances.
Right. In the U.S., we love the story of the late bloomer. You mess up high school, go to community college, transfer, work your way up. In South Korea, the belief is that your track is set at age 18. The college you get into determines your first job. That first job determines your whole career. If you slip, you don't recover.
That puts an unimaginable amount of pressure on that one single test, the Sunon.
It creates what game theorists would call a prisoner's dilemma. Even if a parent absolutely hates the hagwon system, and Mrs. Lee's diary makes it clear that many of them do, they feel they cannot unilaterally disarm.
Because if I pull my kid out, but you keep your kid in, my kid is the one who falls behind.
Exactly. So everyone stays in the arms race because they're terrified of the alternative. It's a collective trap.
Speaking of pulling the kid out, that brings us back to Mrs. Lee. Because she actually did it. She found an escape hatch.
She did. In 2024, she pulled her daughters out of the Daiichi grind. But, and she's very open about this, she used a ripcord that's only available to the wealthy. She sent them to a boarding school in the United States.
So her solution to the Korean system was to just leave the country.
Yes. But the result of that move gives us maybe the single most important insight of this whole deep dive. Remember, in Korea, her oldest daughter was struggling. She felt bad at math. Her self-esteem was tanking.
Right. She was the one who was lacking because she wasn't some math prodigy at age 10.
Well, she gets to the U.S. school, having studied up to the 8th grade level in Daiichi. And in the American system, she is considered a math genius.
No way.
Mrs. Lee actually laughs about it in one interview. She says, go to the U.S. after studying math in Daiichi, people will call you a genius. Her daughter went from feeling like a failure to being the top student in her grade, literally overnight.
That is a massive a moment. It just shows how relative these standards are. The exact same kid with the exact same brain is a failure in one place and a prodigy in another.
It perfectly highlights the bubble. The standard for failure in Daiichi is incredibly high, but the cost of maintaining that standard is what people are finally starting to question.
So is the government doing anything? I mean, they have to see this data. You mentioned the birth rate is crashing.
Oh, the government is definitely panicking. South Korea has the lowest fertility rate in the world. It's around 0.72 births per woman. That's population collapse territory. And they are drawing a direct line from that number to the hagwons.
Parents are basically going on a birth strike.
They're saying, I can't afford to have kids because I can't afford the private education required to make sure they succeed. It's a vicious cycle. The system is so efficient at producing workers that it's stopping people from creating the next generation of them.
So have they tried to, ban them?
They've tried. Lawmakers proposed banning entrance exams for preschoolers. The National Human Rights Commission even got
It's the
involved.
Human Rights Commission.
Yes, they called the testing of toddlers a violation of children's rights. That's how severe this has gotten.
That's some pretty strong language.
It is, but, and this is the big but, the reality on the ground hasn't changed much. The experts in our sources note that despite urging from authorities to stop these competitive admissions, the anxiety around college is just too strong.
You can't legislate away the fear.
Exactly. As long as that senior exam exists in its current form, and as long as that massive income gap exists between the winners and the losers, parents will find a way. They'll hire private tutors, they'll go underground. The incentive structure hasn't changed.
It really feels like they're trying to put a lid on a boiling pot without turning down the heat.
That's a perfect analogy. You can ban the preschool tests, but you haven't fixed the fear that drives parents to seek them out in the first place.
So if we try to wrap this all up,
Yeah.
we started by asking if this culture is hurting or helping. And looking at all this evidence, it's just incredibly complicated.
It is. I mean, on paper, it helps by creating students who are objectively academically advanced. The failed student in Daiichi is a math genius in America. That is a form of success.
But the hurting side, the depression in 10-year-olds, the suicide rates, the total loss of childhood play.
And the demographic collapse of the country itself. You have to ask if the price for that academic excellence is just too high.
It's a sobering deep dive today. We've seen the cafes, the math tests for toddlers, and the parents who were caught in this trap.
It really forces you to think hard about what the definition of success even is.
And that is where we want to leave you today. We always like to end with a thought to mull over. We talked about Ms. Lee's daughter labeled slow in Seoul, but a genius in the U.S. So here's the question. If a child's intelligence can change from failure to prodigy just by crossing a border, are these competitive systems actually measuring intelligence at all? Or are they just measuring a child's tolerance for suffering?
That's the question.
Thanks for listening to this deep dive. We'll see you next time.